Good evening, Wapaka. As Ann mentioned, some know, Wapaka was my home from 2020 until 2024. Much as I liked living here, circumstances made it necessary to return to sweet home Chicago. Tonight, we're exploring loneliness. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? The answer to both questions is yes. No surprise, right? Why I teach philosophy. Tonight we're going to examine loneliness from a variety of viewpoints. We'll bring philosophy, psychology, cosmology, the martial arts, neurobiology, and a touch of spirituality to our presentation. As mentioned, I'm a third-degree black belt in the Korean martial art of Taekwondo. I taught Taekwondo for many years, and so I'm beginning with the notion of a worthy opponent. A worthy opponent is someone just a bit better than you are. If you spar with someone considerably less trained, you will not learn much. If you spar with someone significantly more adept, you'll be pummeled. To me, loneliness is a worthy opponent. A worthy opponent merits our respect. This doesn't mean that we don't feel fear. I recall my first tournament and first sparring opponent. He outweighed me by 40 pounds and was as tall as I am. And I thought, what in God's name am I doing here? How can I get out of this? But many of my Taekwondo mates were present. I had to compete. I had to fight. And what I quickly discovered was that my opponent was not agile. His size prevented speed. And it wasn't much of a contest. If I had withdrawn from that match, I may never have fought in competition. But because I fought that first fight, I competed in a good number of tournaments, including the Louisiana State Tournament. I was never defeated. And when I teach or give a presentation, I usually bring up my martial arts background, just in case someone wants to argue. I'm just saying, and yes, that's a joke. Loneliness is a worthy opponent and a fearsome one. We have the right to fear it. If you haven't tangled with it, if you haven't wrestled with it, you're very unusual. Over half of our fellow citizens suffer bouts of loneliness regularly. No wonder loneliness is such a common refrain in our popular songs. The title of our talk tonight harkens back to a song from 1927. But we're surely more familiar with the 1960 Elvis version. Now, if Elvis doesn't grab you, there's a plethora of other tunes that might. Paul Anka's Lonely Boy. Roy Orbison's Only the Lonely. And who can forget Faron Young's Hello Walls? There's always the Hank Williams 1949 classic, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. For me, the most chilling song about loneliness is the Beatles' Eleanor Rigby. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they belong? If we want an example from the world of art, I suggest Hooper's Nighthawks from 1947, which I ponder as I make my monthly pilgrimage to the Chicago Art Institute. Dr. Murthy noted what he called an epidemic of loneliness in 2023, U.S. Surgeon General. Loneliness is essentially about belonging. When we don't belong, we experience the pang and pains of loneliness. I must admit, I never felt I belonged here in Waupaca. And that's not the fault of Waupaca. Here's the thing. I'm a city boy. And more specifically, I'm a Chicago city boy. And even though I've lived in many places during my long life, I've never felt at home anywhere but Chicago. And I believe the place our hearts recognize as home is where we spent the majority of our childhood. For me, 7647 South Sangamon in the Gresham neighborhood of South Chicago is home. Even though I haven't lived there since I was 15. No other place has replaced that home. So, in effect, I've been homeless for over 60 years. And I suspect many here share feelings of homelessness. Homelessness and loneliness have a similar feeling. I recall 7 years I spent in northern Louisiana, 3 years as campus minister at Louisiana Tech University, and 4 years as pastor and campus minister at Grambling State University. And even though I loved my time at Grambling, there was no denying that to most Louisiana folk, I was a Yankee. And not only that, I was a damn Yankee. And trust me when I say that the Civil War has never ended in the Deep South. During my years in Louisiana, I yearned for Chicago. Now, brothers and sisters, we need to feel lonely if we wish to remain human. Loss is a bittersweet fact of life. We all lose people we care about. Loss and loneliness are intimately connected, intimately intertwined. If one doesn't experience loss, there's a fair chance such a person could be categorized as antisocial personality disordered. According to the DSM-5, the mental health Bible, so to speak, some 3% of the U.S. population has this disorder. Among men in prison, the percentage jumps to 70%. And this disorder is virtually incurable. Try not to marry one. Most of us suffer when we lose those we care about. I lost my father when I was 11. I lost my beautiful wife to cancer after not quite 10 years of marriage. I lost my wonderful companion, Vanell, to a stroke 2 years ago. I lost my older brother the day I moved back to Chicago from Waupaca. So I know what loss is. Trust me when I say loss leads to loneliness. It's supposed to. Loneliness makes us human. Without it, we'd be machines. If I asked how many here tonight are widowed, the number would be high. If I asked how many are estranged from parts of their family, the number would be high. If I asked how many had children or grandchildren living far away, the number would surprise us. Such is the nature of life today. No wonder loneliness comes calling. But while loneliness might stop by for a visit, we don't want it to become a personal guest, permanently staying with us and causing trouble. Loneliness feels like a disappointment that's in some way eating our soul. Life can beat us up. Life can be a bully. But here's the thing, we must face bullies, especially the ones that frighten us most. No backing down. Loneliness will bully us if we don't stand up to it. I recall going to a movie years ago in Monroe, Louisiana. I saw a young man gripping a young woman's hair and smashing her head into the car window. I yelled, "Stop it! If you need to fight someone, fight me." This was when I was in prime martial arts condition. Naturally, like most enraged men, he swore at me, but he stopped attacking the woman. They got into the car and drove away. Nowadays, I'd probably be shot. Loneliness unsettles us at our core. Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band is always playing our song. But maybe, just maybe, loneliness isn't a reviled foe, but rather a demanding, snarky teacher. For me, the teachers and professors I remember best were the ones who challenged me most. We humans have two great hungers wired into us. The first is a hunger for transcendence, a fancy word that means we hunger for something more, something bigger than our solitary self. Call it a need for meaning. It lies at the base of every religion. The second great hunger is a hunger for others, a hunger for intimacy and deep connection. We need to belong. We need to be part of a clan. We need to be part of some group. Otherwise, we remain rootless, a tumbling tumbleweed. According to recent research, loneliness injures your health as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It often leads to depression, anxiety, and suicide. Loneliness hastens death. Social disconnection, sisters and brothers, is more dangerous than drinking too much, weighing too much, or exercising too little. Now, I'm not suggesting drink whatever you want. I'm not suggesting you should just weigh whatever you want to or never exercise. But loneliness brings a risk of early death, heart attack, and stroke. And here's something else disturbing. Loneliness over time changes your brain. Over time, loneliness causes a person to become less sociable, less friendly. Grumpy old men indeed. And here's an obvious problem. No one wants to admit being lonely. It feels like a failure. If we're not paired with someone, society thinks there's something wrong with us. Being a solitary seems antisocial. We can't imagine that being alone is a choice some of us choose to make. Why, it seems downright un-American. But I ask, what's wrong with enjoying solitude? I really like my time alone. Unfortunately, we live in a hyper-extroverted society where being constantly engaged is the expectation. And let me note here the most fundamental American myth. Myth is a deep wisdom in religion or in society, in culture, The most fundamental American myth is the myth of the cowboy. The man who only needs his horse and a six-gun. This is unquestionably the dominant myth in our country. It's everywhere, not just in Texas. Let me share some thoughts from the psychoanalyst philosopher Rollo May. This comes from his 1991 book, The Cry for Myth. Our most powerful and pervasive myth is that of the lone cowboy. He has no real home. He wanders from place to place, bringing his brand of frontier justice wherever needed, dispatching Native Americans and outlaws. He has no roots, a solitary wanderer. This is our predominant American icon. According to May, it arises from our lack of historical roots and our continual moving from place to place. This myth, brothers and sisters, is especially dangerous because it perpetuates the heresy that we need to go it alone. We can depend on no one but ourselves. What a debilitating notion. It leads to a hypervigilance because no one can be trusted except maybe family, and that's never a given. Enemies are everywhere. Never let down your guard. Always keep your gun handy. No wonder we're so messed up. It's like we're all trapped in a John Wick movie. God help us. As Parker Palmer writes in On the Brink of Everything, and by the way, I have the books up here for people to look at afterwards. We live in a culture of violence. Even if we're not at daily risk of physical injury or death, as so many are, he writes, in the gun-obsessed United States, our culture relentlessly assaults our souls with noise, frenzy, consumerism, tribalism, homophobia, misogyny, racism, and more. And it's common to become desensitized to these assaults. I add this. As long as we celebrate the Lone Ranger, we will remain isolated from each other. Isolation grips us when we feel there's no one we can trust. And trust today is a very scarce commodity. Who do we trust? Politicians? Clergy? People who say what we want to hear? We have an inborn system for trust. It's called the amygdala, an almond-shaped area in the midbrain that triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response to danger. And as the neuroscientist David Goldman notes in Social Intelligence, the amygdala acts as a radar for the brain. It operates the brain's early warning system, scanning everything that happens, ever vigilant, especially for potential threats. Fear most powerfully arouses the amygdala. Further from Goldman, the amygdala automatically and compulsively scans everyone we encounter for whether they can be trusted. Is it safe to approach this guy? Is he dangerous? Can I count on him or not? Can you trust me tonight? Am I some sort of big city con artist selling my version of snake oil? Did I vote the right way or not in the last election? Am I a member of your tribe? We humans are clannish, tribal. Throughout our roughly 350,000-year-long odyssey, our ancestors spent most of their time in clans of 50 to 100 people, which I believe, by the way, is the perfect size for a church congregation. I remember when I moved here and went to get my driver's license, I jokingly asked the woman assisting me, "Do I really have to become a Green Bay Packers fan?" She replied very sternly, "It wouldn't hurt." But forgive me for confessing this, I couldn't do it. I tried. I took a tour of the Packers Stadium, but I just could not complete the transformation from Chicago Bears fan to Green Bay Packers fan. And by the way, sports is how many of us, especially men, deal with loneliness and the feeling of not belonging. You belong to the clan of Packers fans. I belong to the clan of Bears fans. See how it works? A quick theological reflection. God is not a Packers fan. Sorry about that. God is not a Bears fan either. God is a fan of the saints. I know. I couldn't resist it. I'm sorry. I apologize. It's interesting that more people watch the NFL on any given Sunday than attend church services. So the NFL is our country's largest denomination. Now, we surely know that women are better at social connections than men. Let me share something more from Goldman. Under stress, a woman's brain secretes more oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, than a man's brain. This has a calming effect and moves women to seek out others which allows their body to release more oxytocin, which calms them even more. Androgens, male sex hormones like testosterone, suppress the calming benefits of oxytocin. So that when facing a threat, women seek out companionship while men go it alone. No surprise, right? Back to the cowboy, back to the lone wolf. Again, from Goldman, the more close friends women have, the less likely they are to develop physical impairments as they age. And the more likely they are to lead a joyful life in their later years. The same does not go for men. We men as a whole are not as sociable as women. And brothers, please understand, I'm only the messenger. Older men neglect their health more than women. I attend 3 or 4 exercise classes weekly. These classes always have more women in them than men. Women take classes. Men exercise alone. Men don't express sadness well. Male sadness comes across as irritability and anger. Male grief, ungrieved, leads to grumpiness. Male grief, ungrieved, easily tumbles into the abuse of alcohol and drugs. Let me add a classic description of grief from C.S. Lewis. His wife, Joy, died, and in A Grief Observed wrote this: "No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness. It feels at times like being mildly drunk or concussed. There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me." Grief and loneliness are joined at the hip. To deal with loneliness, we must confront grief. Much as I enjoy Dr. Kubler-Ross's 1969 book on death and dying, there are no actual 5 stages of grief. It's as individual as the person grieving. So, how do we handle our necessary grieving? Some may know that I'm the son of Irish immigrants. I've traveled to that soggy country 20 times. We Irish deal with life and loss with dark humor. I chuckle when I hear people declare how friendly the Irish are to visitors. I tell them that being friendly at the pub is their job. Tourism is one of Ireland's main industries. Of course they'll appear friendly to visitors, but it's all surface. You'll seldom be allowed access to the Irish psyche, the dark Irish soul drenched in sorrow, Guinness, and lousy weather. Here's an example of dark Irish humor. At my wife's memorial, I mentioned in the sermon that I wasn't sure how I'd survive her loss, but I suspected drugs or alcohol might be involved. That was a semi-joke. After the memorial, my nephew John came up to me and in perfect dark Irish humor said, "Uncle Tom, I found that if you combine the two, they work better." You want a movie example of dark Irish humor? Watch Waking Ned Devine. My brother had an example of it when we were celebrating, my twin brother that is, when we were celebrating our 70th birthday. I mentioned to him, I said, "You know, Jack, half of all the men who make 70 don't make 80. And he looked at me and said, "I'll miss you." Sisters and brothers, to deal with loneliness, to deal with loss, requires a sense of humor. If you haven't laughed at yourself in the past week, something's amiss. But unfortunately, we don't treasure humor as much as we need to. When did our religion become so humorless? When did our politics become so humorless? When did we become so humorless? If you have the inclination, I highly recommend reading A.J. Jacobs' 2007 classic book, The Year of Living Biblically. If his book doesn't make you laugh, find a good therapist. Here's another recommendation. This comes from my twin brother and sister-in-law. Some months back, they were driving to their daughter and son-in-law in Tennessee. Jack called me and said they were very much enjoying a book called Dog on It during their drive. Dog on It is the first of 16 best-selling novels by Spencer Quinn. Right now, I'm listening to number 13, Bark to the Future. Each book is narrated from the perspective of a dog named Chet. I find myself laughing all the time. Do yourself a favor and discover them if you haven't done so. The library carries them all. As someone who's pastored congregations for almost 50 years, hear me when I say, never attend a church where the pastor has no sense of humor. My only political comment tonight, never vote for anyone who lacks a sense of humor. As Parker J. Palmer notes in his 2011 majestic book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, Lincoln rejected the coping techniques of his time in favor of poetry and humor, which are doorways to understanding. The best humor is often self-deprecating humor, humor directed at oneself. If you're unable to laugh at yourself, seek assistance. Drugs and alcohol might help. A joke. I'm not sure where I came across this quotation, but it's something we could all take to heart. Don't worry, you really are inadequate. As the philosopher Jacob Needleman noted, there's an old saying, life is a tragedy for the person who feels and a comedy for the person who thinks. As those who attended my monthly Philosophy for Seniors discussions at the Episcopalian Church remember, Needleman is my favorite philosopher. And here's something from Needleman's book, Necessary Wisdom. He mentions questions of the heart. Why am I here? Is death the end? How should I best live my life? Does God exist? Why does evil exist? Needleman argues, people who come together to discuss these questions can help each other enormously in a way that we don't get helped either by therapy or political discussions. And let me add something from a recent book, Healing the Modern Brain, psychiatrist Drew Ramsey. Humans, by our very natures, are social creatures. Our brains are designed to promote social connections. Not only do our brains help us propagate the species, but they also ensure we have the help and support needed to survive. Back on the savannah, our hunter-gatherer ancestors relied on others to find food, avoid predators, and raise children. A healthy brain is a connected brain. Having social support, so he writes, having social support helps increase the ingredient for brain growth and plasticity by 27%. Studies show that social support helps reduce bodily inflammation. This is very important, since brain inflammation is associated with depression and anxiety. Ramsey notes a Swiss study that found social isolation is associated with an 11-fold increase in the risk of moderate to severe depression. In other words, we need each other, or else we fall off the edge. Yes, it takes a village to raise children, but it also takes a village to keep us elders from drowning in a sea of emptiness. I highly recommend a recent book by Dr. Monty Lyman, The Immune Mind. When we are sick, our brains cause us to withdraw from others, to protect the clan. When we are around sick people, we withdraw from them. When we are around strangers, our brains cause us to withdraw from them lest they be diseased. The feeling of loneliness may be a natural reaction to instances of bodily inflammation and fear of contagion. A quote from Lyman: following a traumatic event, whether it be war, childhood abuse, severe pain, a nasty infection, our brain's predictive baseline can be dislocated and end up becoming hypersensitive, expecting to be in constant danger long after the peril has passed. That's what inflammation does to you. To date, there have been roughly 117 billion humans born on Earth. And no, I didn't count them. And even though there are currently 8.2 billion humans alive, roughly 93% of all our fellow humans have already died. When I was born, sometime in antiquity, the human population was 2.4 billion. The human race has almost quadrupled during my lifetime. Our U.S. population in that time frame has gone from 141 million to 342 million, a 240% increase. No wonder our country and the rest of the world have issues with overcrowding, with immigration, with warfare, with poverty, with unemployment and underemployment. And here's something to keep in mind from John Green's new book, Tuberculosis is Everywhere. Roughly 50% of all the humans who were ever born died by the age of 5. Ponder that. And by the way, if you're not familiar with John Green, please become familiar with him. He's rightly famous for hundreds of YouTube videos under the Crash Course name. I use him all the time in my philosophy classes. Let me add a quote from his book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, Essays. At the end of his life, the great picture book author and illustrator Maurice Sendak, famous for his 1963 Where the Wild Things Are, said on the NPR show Fresh Air, "I cry a lot because I miss people. I cry a lot because they die and I can't stop them. They leave me and I love them more." He said, "I'm finding out as I'm aging that I'm in love with the world." That was his last interview. And Green writes in response, "We all know how loving ends, but I want to fall in love with the world anyway, to let it crack me open." Loneliness can crack us open, but only if we don't run from it. Fear it by all means, but deal with it like that crazy uncle or crazy aunt hiding out in your family's closet. And let's keep in mind a lyric from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. "Ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." We do well to ponder this truth. And while we're on the topic of truth, years ago I traveled to Las Cruces, New Mexico to attend a week-long retreat led by Franciscan Richard Rohr. The retreat was the most engaging I've experienced. Rohr offered 5 truths we need to learn in life. Here are those 5 truths. Life is hard. You are going to die. You are not that important. You are not in control. And your life is not about you. If we embrace these truths, I believe that we'll be more fully equipped to wrestle with loneliness. Also, don't take everything too personally. That's a truth from the martial arts. Those unable to advance very far in their training were those who took every kick and punch personally. Here's the thing. The person you're fighting with, the person you're sparring with, is your teacher. They are teaching you where you're most vulnerable, where you need to pay attention. That's why at the start of every match, every person bows to the other. You also bow at the end. Spouses, I think it'd be a good idea before you have that next argument, bow to each other. You're teaching each other. Loneliness is our teacher. A demanding teacher, to be sure, at times a harsh teacher. Here's a suggestion. Write a letter to your loneliness. Tell it how you want to learn the lessons it's trying to teach you. And then listen. Maybe your loneliness is trying to teach you humility. Maybe your loneliness is trying to make you friendlier than you might otherwise be. I know that I'm not nearly as friendly as I could be. My twin brother is much more sociable than I am. True? First cousin, one removed. So. Everybody likes Jack. Me, not so much. I wish I had his social intelligence or the social intelligence of dearly departed Vanell. I'm more solitary. I probably have made a good cowboy. But here's one plus. I'm interesting. I carry a boatload of stories and what might be loosely termed life wisdom. I tell my students that when seeking a life partner, there's not much they can do about the way they look. But one can make oneself more interesting. And the only way to become more interesting is to read, learn, learn. Become interesting to be with. Do you realize how many people I have been with that are boring? I didn't mean to say that. Wipe that off. But become interesting to be with. If you don't enjoy your own company, no one else will either. Make libraries and bookstores your second home. And I used to tell seniors at a senior center I went to very close to the church where I was pastor 12 years. And I would tell them there are two things please don't talk to me about. Your grandchildren and your bowels. Let me also mention, by the way, that if you're bored, there's a fair chance you're boring. Be dazzled. Be amazed. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being disconnected. So connect with everything, with the entire earth. Connect with the cosmos. Learn all you can about the Webb Space Telescope and the images we're being gifted with. Listen to this. Our Earth is just one of 3.2 trillion planets in our galaxy. The Sun is just one of 200 billion stars in our galaxy. The Milky Way is just one of 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. Wow. I recommend a free phone app called Sky View Lite, L-I-T-E, which it's free. they'll want you to upgrade, don't. Just stay with the free. You can point it at the night sky, and it will name whatever you're looking at. Now, it's harder for me in Chicago because of our ambient light everywhere. But when I was here, I was always walking around where my Golf View estate, the apartment, pointing at the sky and figuring out the constellations and stars and everything. I'm sure they thought I had lost it, but not uncommon. I've come to embrace what I see as the 4 fundamental tasks of life. I call them the 4 L's, like some 1950s doo-wop group. What are my 4 L's? Life is for listening, learning, loving, living. Let me add, this, by the way, is Vanell and I in front of St. Francis Basilica in Assisi. Let me also add what I believe are the 3 pursuits worth chasing. They are known by their ancient name, the Transcendentals. They are truth, beauty, goodness. Pursue them. I'm going to conclude with 3 books I'd like you to read. The first is Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project, or Why I Spend a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun. I especially liked her June chapter, Make Time for Friends. At Morgan Park Baptist Church, I did a 12-part series of sermons based on her book. It's a delight. I likewise highly recommend Parker J. Palmer's wonderful 2018 book, On the Brink of Everything, Grace, Gravity, and Getting Old. Buy copies for your elderly friends. And finally, the 2018 fascinating Johann Hari book, Lost Connections: Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. When I read this book, highlighting it as I always do, I thought it would serve as the core for this presentation. Such was not to be. Since I was unable to bring this book to our presentation, let me highlight a quote from it. He writes, "What I was being taught about curing depression by the experts is, if you want to stop being depressed, which is its own kind of deep loneliness, don't be you. Don't be yourself. It's thinking about you that help make you feel so lousy. Don't be you, be us. Be we. Be part of the group. Make the group worth it. The real path to happiness comes from dismantling our ego walls, from letting yourself flow into other people's stories and letting their stories flow into yours, from pooling your identity, from realizing that you were never you, alone, heroic, sad, all alone. Don't be you. Be connected with everyone around you. Be part of the whole. 2 things which grace my life here in Waupaca, which I'm going to recommend as we conclude this presentation and head to questions. Walk the woods. More days than not, I drive to the Veteran Cemetery, park there and walk the walking trail. It's adjacent to the cemetery. Most days I'd encounter deer. I used to keep track of how many. And I love listening to the birds. Another free phone app I highly recommend, Merlin Bird ID from Cornell. It's free, you don't have to upgrade. You point it into a tree or wherever, it will identify the birds that you're listening to. The birds really do keep us company. Finally, if you are able, start playing pickleball. The pickleball I played regularly at the Wapaka Senior Center was profoundly helpful to me as I dealt with my own losses. Do yourself a favor and start playing. It's easy to learn. And you have to be a member. Who cares? What's a membership like? $15 or something, you know. 20. Oh, Lord. So I play pickleball twice a week. I go to my gym twice a week, and I walk the woods twice a week by my house. And I really recommend that, because if we stay home, I think loneliness happens more easily than if we get out. We know that the best, it's good to get out in the morning, get early sunshine. It helps set your time clock. It helps you sleep at night. So try and be able to get out as much as you can. That's certainly a very important thing. I want to add one more thing before we get to questions. And I may have given this to you before, I'm not sure. HALT, H-A-L-T. Try never to get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired. HALT. Bad things happen when you do one or all of those four things. So take care of yourself. If you need to go get a massage, do that. If you need to walk the woods, do it. If you need to call somebody, do it. I believe we have to connect with somebody every day. And it may be somebody that we haven't spoken to for a while. My mother, bless her, lived to 95 by herself and spent half the day on the phone calling, I don't know who, but she was on the phone all the time. And I think we have to do that. Otherwise, loneliness will always pursue us. It'll always try and assault us, and we've got to get the jump on it. We've got to be able to see it for what it is. It's a bully, and you've got to stand up to it and do what you can. So, I end with my favorite poet, Mary Oliver. Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Amen.
Does anybody have a question or a comment?
I'll start right here. Right from the get-go. Tom, the one thing that I noticed in your presentation is that you talk a lot about loneliness. The thing that scared me the most during COVID was isolation. Not
Yeah.
being able to communicate with anybody.
right? Right?
And that darn near killed me.
I hear you. I hated teaching online. That's why I quit teaching at the time. The church couldn't have people. I was doing it all, online. That's why I retired as pastor. That's why I came to Wapaka. My friend Vanell was here. Only reason I came. And so we would have supper every night, either her place or mine, whichever. But yes, very hard thing. I want to, by the way, before we get to the next question, for 5 years, I spent writing a manuscript. And I just sent it off last week to a first publisher. We'll see, my publisher is gone from Chicago. It's called How Together We Can Help Heal Religion, a Hopeful Perspective from a Badass Pastor. There you go. So also, you'll find over on the table there index cards. If you print your email, print please, I will send you a copy of this talk along with the PowerPoint. So, just print it to me. It may take me a few days because this has gone through a lot of different versions and editions, but I'll be happy to send it to you, but you got to get me your email and I'll send it along. Okay.
Just a comment, after 2 near-death experiences and 47 days at UW Hospital and 2 helicopter rides from Wapaka, I was not social. Man, I was quiet. Not anymore. The 4 L's fit me just perfectly now. And I just won't shut up. My wife will talk.
No, you're going to do the next presentation.
Maybe.
Most of what I say, my wife will say this 52 years, most of what I say since 2020 is not true.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to mention, by the way, you want to up your mood, and walking forward, by the way, just even the process of walking forward ups your mood. Also, this is going to sound really weird. Take a pencil, put it in your mouth. It activates your smile muscles. It lifts your mood. And actually, it really does. And we weren't able to get into music so much. Every night, going to bed, I listen to either The Lark Ascending, Ralph Vaughan Williams, or Bob Marley. I especially like Bob Marley's 3 Little Birds. It's one of the few songs I can sing along. If I ever get invited to do karaoke, I'm going to do 3 Little Birds. And I sit there drinking my cocoa and listening to Bob Marley. I especially am taken right now by his song War, which of course is scary for all of us. So music has to be part of it. It has to be part of it. And please, make at least one composer a friend of yours. Okay.
His question was answered.
Okay. I've got a observation, I guess you would call it. You mentioned the thing about the sports kind of unifying
Yes.
men and whatever, and I just read an article, I think it was in the New York Times, about how that part of our culture is sort of disintegrating because the leagues and the teams are all contracting with different services. There's streaming services, there's the major networks, there's this, that, and the other, and everybody can't subscribe to all of them to see all of their games.
Yes.
And the price of in-person participation has gotten out of reach for many of us. And so our culture is at risk because of that. It was a big unifying thing. Even a bar owner that will televise something and get a crowd of people in there cheering or whatever, they may not have the service of the favorite team. People get up and leave. They've got an empty house. So it's really something. And I've often thought, like 15 years ago, that the entertainment industry is similarly fractured, and we don't have that common thing. Last week we had our program on I Love Lucy.
Mhm.
Everybody in the room's familiar with I Love Lucy. But today's generations, I don't think, have that common experience of whatever it is, entertainment, those touchstones that make us feel like we belong.
Would you move just because we have a recording right there? Okay. Let me, any more questions? I can always throw in more stuff.
Can you talk a little bit about introverts and extroverts?
Yeah.
And how that may vary the degree of loneliness for a person? And I asked this question, my mother was an extreme introvert.
Yes.
My father was an extrovert.
Yes.
And I'm happy that I take after my father. So how does that play into loneliness?
So let me first mention a really important book called The Highly Sensitive People. Elaine Aron, A-R-O-N, and about 10% of people are highly sensitive. That's different than being introverted. As we know, extroversion, introversion comes from Carl Jung. And basically, the idea is an introvert. I married an introvert. My wife was introverted. Introvert figures it all out beforehand. You know, an extrovert has to say it, get it out there, write it out there, somehow get it out there, or else they don't know what they're thinking. So I used to tell my wife, I said, would you please understand, every time I say something, no matter how strongly I say it, there's a question mark at the end. I'm just, you know. Problem with introversion is that our culture is so highly extroverted. You know, it's so introverts don't fit in, and that's always a problem because societies, all cultures, prefer people who conform than those that don't. It's just the nature of it. That's why I use the term in my new, you know, badass thing, because, you know, I don't think I ever conform to anything. And it's, there's a very cute saying I came across somewhere, which is, I had to choose between correcting people's English or having friends. and you know, obviously as we get older, the idea is we become more like a peach on the inside as we become more like a prune on the outside, an old saying. So extroversion, introversion, our culture, our world is harder for introverts. My wife lost every job she ever had, bless her, but she was head of counseling at my church. And what I was glad to give her was from an old Bob Dylan song, Shelter from the Storm, which she never had. And even though she went much too quickly, she was a marathon runner and all of it, and we tried to, you know, that's life. What can you do? And at Morgan Park, I buried half the congregation. And, you know, it's an extroverted world, and salespeople have to be extroverted or they're not going to make a living at it. We need both. We need to both of those. I'd probably become more, I always said I was a shy extrovert. And is really more the case because as a pastor, I have to be sociable. I can't say.
It's now 7:50 p.m. The library will be closing in 10 minutes. Please bring your final collections forward to the main desk. Thank
We
you
can
for
stay
joining us
late.
Today we will reopen tomorrow at 9 a.m.
There you go. They, a quick quote, you can see it on YouTube. I watch YouTube more than anything else, probably, on television, from the series Ted Lasso. Now, the language is an issue for people that are sensitive to language and swearing. But in one of the episodes, they're throwing darts. It's worth seeing on YouTube. Language might, unsettle you. He talks about a Walt Whitman quote: "Be curious, not judgmental." And that's always what I'm trying with my students. And it works sometimes. It doesn't work all the time. And please, if you want a copy of this, remember, you have to give me your email printed out. I'll get it to you along with the slides. So all the books that I recommended, they're up here. You can take a look at them. And what do you want to do about time?
We're good.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment about the extrovert-introvert thing. There's a book, and I apologize, I don't remember the author's name, but it's called Quiet. And it really explains what the, I guess, psychologists, personality people have defined as introvert and extrovert. And it talks about the culture thing, like you were saying. So it's available here in the library if anybody is interested.
Let me add one or two things also. Technically, you are never alone. The human person is made up of 30 trillion human cells and 38 trillion microbes. You are more microbe than human. So just to say you're never alone, and also, I wasn't able to get into it, but dopamine. That book I mentioned about stress and the inflamed mind, it's a fascinating book. And dopamine is what drives almost all addictions. And if you get hits of dopamine, which you get from being excited, by enjoying something, by all of that, it's a hit of dopamine. You can burn out your dopamine producers. If you have too little dopamine, you have Parkinson's. That's what my older brother had. That's what he died from. But do you know what too much dopamine does? Too much dopamine is called schizophrenia. So balance is important in all these things. Otherwise, you can go one side or the other. You can get into an addiction. You can do that. So balance, I do balance PT and stretching and all of it every day. 'Cause balance is so critically important, as is flexibility. You have to try to remain flexible, and that includes not only your body, although that's important, very important, but your mind as well, okay? And it's easy to just let all of that go. I mean, I live in a complex of 650 people. I live by myself in a kind of a duplex, 3-bedroom, which I love, which I'm very happy to be in. But I see these guys who, you think the way they dress and look and deal with them, and I'm like, good Lord. But I don't want to be hard on men. I really don't. I am one. I like them, but we can do better.
Thank you.
Amen.